past year, we've all had to reimagine our lives, searching for new sources of inspiration and new ways to connect.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
I'm Yana Peel, Global Head of Arts and Culture at Chanel, and this is Chanel Connects. Bringing together creative game changers from film, art, dance, music, and fashion in conversation from their homes and studios.
I'm in the north of Scotland.
I'm in my spare room.
It's a very quiet area.
A horrific shade of yellow.
Still in New York City.
Some are old friends and collaborators. Others are meeting for the first time. All are focused on what matters most and what happens next. And now we get to listen in. In this episode, actress Tilda Swinton connects with her longtime friend and collaborator, British Vogue's editor-in-chief, Edward Enninful. The conversation was led by Nicholas Cullinan, director of the National Portrait Gallery.
Could you tell where my head was at when you found me? Me and you went to hell and back just to find peace.
Edward and Tilda, I wanted to begin by asking you where you are, because obviously we're talking through the medium of Zoom, as most of us use these days to communicate. So if you can just both tell me where you are. Tilda, you go.
I'm in the north of Scotland, where I live. I'm sitting in my house. It's just stopped raining and it's looking very golden. I'm in that Zoom world. Where are you, Edward?
I'm in London, in Lancaster Gate, staring out my window to a very rainy and horrible day.
And I'm in the Heinz Library and Archive of the National Portrait Gallery, so I have a very scholarly backdrop.
Great, I love it.
Well, actually, this room I'm in used to be a nightclub where Audrey Hepburn performed in the 1950s, so maybe that could be the next backdrop.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yep, that's a true fact.
Wow.
And then I wanted to ask you both, at the beginning of this year, if we can think that far back, what you thought you might be doing at this time of year.
Well, at the beginning of the year, I was so optimistic, like everybody else. This 2020 is going to be the best year ever. I was convinced by it. I was enthused. And then come March, back home, and I haven't left since. I never thought that a pandemic could literally paralyze the whole world like it has. And I also never thought that one of the biggest social movements in history, really, in American history, Black Lives Matter, would have such a great impact all over the world. And yeah, it's been a real year of reckoning, I guess.
Edward, do you think that the Black Lives Matter movement would have had so much traction if it wasn't for lockdown? Do you think that gave us more focus and attention span?
Yeah. As a Black person, I know that, what happened to George Floyd happens a lot more than people realize. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Ladbroke Grove, where being stopped by the police was part of daily life. And this goes on all the time. But because we were all at home, no distractions, mm-hmm. and literally focused on social media, the movement, the protests were able to take on a life of its own. It wouldn't have happened otherwise, no.
Some people are still trying to be distracted from it, but it is hard work to be distracted from the realities of this reckoning.
Tilda, I think that's a very good point. And I suppose the question to both of you is, in your respective industries or, art forms, do you think there might be positive changes that come from the last few months?
In terms of cinema, which is my drug of choice, cinema's a really, really elastic, bouncy old dame. She has survived so much. One of the first things I did at the beginning of lockdown was I kind of made for my favorites. I made for my favorite films. And I picked up again the massive 2-part biography of one of my favorite filmmakers, Michael Powell, mm-hmm. and which is almost a biography of cinema itself, because he started making films in the very, very beginning in the south of France with Rex Ingram's silent movies. And his description of the earthquake, the tsunami of nightmare of the coming of sound was very telling. And I started reading that, and I got to that section in April, May. And the studios were all crashing. People were losing their livelihoods. People were thinking it's completely over because of sound. And then on we go, and then the coming of colour. Same thing. And on we go. And I'm not just being Pollyanna about it. I believe, and it's not just cine nerds and nuts like me who have missed cinema probably more than anything except our friends and family. It's everybody. Everybody said that the one thing apart from live music, what we really want to do is go to the pictures.
Yeah.
Yep, I completely agree. I'm really missing it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, my industry, the fashion industry, as you know, had already been going through sort of a lot of change. I mean, my work at British Vogue since I started 3 years ago has been about inclusivity and shining a light on the other, people who've been othered their whole lives, whether you're Black, whether you're gay, different religion, age, we've tried to tackle that. And the interesting thing about this year was I think a lot of companies realized that it wasn't just enough to have people from different backgrounds on your feeds or in your campaigns, that to really affect change, employing people behind the scenes was as important. I think that was the most important message that's come out this year, that to really affect change, you need change makers behind the scenes with a seat at the table, so to say.
Absolutely.
So that's been sort of really important. And for me personally, I went from sort of creating regular issues to get into June and realizing, my God, we're in lockdown, and how do I pivot the magazine to sort of meet the moment, as they say? So when they said, women over 60 shouldn't leave their houses, I thought, what a great time to celebrate Judi Dench on the cover. Then from there we went into protests around the world, and we had to reflect it. So we did a September issue sort of based on activists and people who were literally putting their lives on the line and changing the world. And in between that, I thought we were all so exhausted, we needed a break. So I did a series of 14 covers, landscapes by some of our best artists, David Hockney, Martin Parr, David Sims, the best of British. And it was the minute I thought, Michael, we need a break. We need to breathe before we go on fighting again.
I have a question for both of you, which is about celebrity culture, which seems to have lost some of its luster or appeal this year. Do you think this is something that might carry on after this in both of your different spheres?
One of my favourite covers since I've been at British Vogue really was the series that Jamie Hawksworth shot on all the essential workers. All these incredible people out there, the post women, the girl from Waitrose, the train drivers, these people who every single day were putting their lives on the line for us. And it felt important. It felt that these were the people who needed to be celebrated on the cover. So, the industry's changed, the media landscape has changed, heroes have changed.
Yeah.
And I think celebrity culture will always be around, but I think it'll be sort of celebrities who stand for something, not just for themselves.
And do something, because right now...
And do something and fight for something.
I think we've only just begun. I mean, I suppose this is, this makes me reflect that this is the reason I feel so confident about the future. I think that at the very bottom of all of this activism is actually about capital. It's about inequality, and it's the rise of the worker is what we're seeing. Yeah. So everything that Edward's saying is in tune with that. That's not just to do with the fashion industry.
It's harder just to look good on a red carpet. You actually have to have a skill or a talent or a métier. Yeah. So, I mean, has it, in a positive way, has it made both of you think about why you do what you do, looking back at, your trajectory and what you want to do in the future? I mean, it has me, and I think a lot of other people.
You tell us then, Nick, about how it has been.
Yes.
I'm curious.
How's all this? How are you handling everything? How are you pivoting?
So the National Portrait Gallery is an interesting example because we were scheduled to close in June anyway for a major refurbishment. And that's now happening. What we've done, which is similar to what you're both saying, is in response to this, think about why we do what we do and who we do it for. And so in the early days of lockdown, we launched a project with the Duchess of Cambridge, who's our patron, who got in touch with a very good idea to essentially have a public competition and to invite people to submit photographs of their experiences during lockdown and all different experiences. And we got more than 31,000 entries. And it was really moving and quite profound to see the images that were submitted from all four corners of the country, all different experiences, all different walks of life. We did it as a digital exhibition, and there's now this big project all around the country on 400 different billboards. And so what it's made us do is really kind of try to rise to the occasion, as you're both saying, in terms of thinking about, why what you do matters and who it serves.
For me, the real question and the challenge is all about narrative. It's all about stories. We are all, to a certain extent, in a state of grief because we're having to give up on all sorts of fantasies that we had and plans we had and projections into the future that we had. And we're having to recalibrate and regroup and, in many ways, start completely again. But I think that question of narrative, the way in which the stories stop. Oh, that's never going to happen. I'm not going to have that wedding. I'm not going to go on that holiday. I'm not going to graduate. I'm not going to get that job. One just has to dig deeper and recalibrate one's courage and one's imagination.
Tilda, that was exactly the word I was going to use, which I think for all of us, in our respective spheres, I think it's made all of us live more within the realms of our imagination and to draw on resources that are readily at hand, whether it's books or music or film or, I think that's become even more important than ever. Don't you think?
I haven't felt, I could say, it's been tough. It's been tough being away from my team. It's been tough being away from the office. Every decision to sort of carry out takes days, but I haven't felt more creative. I haven't felt more inspired. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I look out there and I see a whole generation of kids essentially leading marches all around the world. People creating incredible art online, music. I think, when times like this happen, you go within yourself or in your fantasies, in your head, and hopefully come up with something that makes the world, a slightly better place. I really believe that.
I want to talk about something apart from this year now. Can I take the conversation back? I want to ask you both about when you first met and when you first collaborated together.
I just remembered.
You remembered because we tried to...
I remembered.
Go.
I think it was in Paris at a fashion show.
Okay.
I went backstage and I remember saying to a friend of mine, oh my God, there's my favorite actress, Tilda Swinton, my God. And I think I came up to you and introduced myself, and you were so full of life and charming and everything I thought you'd be, and smart. And I remember rushing back to my hotel room and calling the late Franca Sonzani, who was the editor-in-chief of Italian Vogue, and say, Franca, you have to, I would love to shoot a story with Tilda Swinton. I haven't met anyone more inspiring. And I wanted to do Craig McDean. We were in Paris. And Franca was like, fine. And I remember tracking you down, a studio, Metro Studios in London, where we shot a story, a tribute to David Bowie, with you as David Bowie in the boiler suits, one of my favorite stories ever.
It was such fun. And that, in fact, I'm in the wrong room for it, but hanging, if I was sitting in another room, it's hanging. I see it every day.
Wow.
From that shoot. That was, but I sort of can't remember a time we didn't know each other.
My history with Tilda is sort of quite long. At ID, we just shot, Italian Vogue would just shoot. And then I went to W Magazine. And whenever Tilda felt she wanted to say something through photographs or whatever, she was there. It was never to promote anything, ever. She's the ultimate muse for me. So whenever I get a call, or I call and she's ready, it's like a great day.
And I do remember a very, very funny moment when I was shooting a film in America.
Michael Clayton?
No, I didn't say. I was shooting Michael Clayton on the streets of New York. I think it was kind of quite late in the day. I suppose it was a commuter moment when people were going home from work. Yeah. It was on the streets and we were preparing to do quite a sort of intense scene. And I was running through. The camera was not actually turning at the time. And Edward just popped up. And I was standing there dressed as this, I thought unrecognizable, but obviously not. It rather hurt my feelings that he knew who I was. And he ran up to me and started chatting to me. And over his shoulder was George Clooney, who I was supposed to be doing a scene with. And it took quite a long time to get through to him that I was actually in the middle of shooting a scene. It was so sweet.
Oh my God, that's literally walked into the middle of the scene.
You stole the show. Can you tell us more about the Almodovar film? Because I'm dying to see it, like The Human Voice.
Yes, we had this plan. Last year, I was in Colombia shooting with another master, Apichat Ponga Etcetical, and I had the graceful opportunity to open an email from Pedro Almodovar saying that he wanted us to shoot something, an adaptation of Jean Cocteau's La Voix Humaine, The Human Voice, which is sort of like, tablet in stone as far as I'm concerned. And anyway, we had this plan and we were sort of tinkering with the plans at the beginning of the year. And then everything fell off the edge of the flat earth. And we thought probably won't be doing it anytime soon. And then as the weeks went by, we just all kind of, looked at each other through the ether and said, no, let's try and do it. It's a tiny, tiny film. It's a monologue. It's a woman and a dog. And we can do it, we can control it. Yeah. And so in July, I went to Madrid and we shot. And it was very interesting because I think we might have been the first sort of cinema production, even though we're a very small film, we're only 30 minutes. I think we were the first cinema production to start rolling after full-time lockdown. And we took a sort of selfie on the set and somebody with social media tweeted it out and it went completely viral and it was very moving to me. And I think it was because, funnily enough, this tips us into the idea of portraiture. People just went crackers for this photograph because I suppose it was, first of all, good news. It was somebody's doing something in cinema. But I think it was also a kind of, they're able to do it. And it was a portrait. It's kind of interesting, that photograph. You both can tell me about how significant these images can be on social media. They become portraits because they have the spirit of the moment.
That's what a good Instagram portrait for me is, when it captures the moment. I like when the work is about the times we live in and the people who live in that time.
I wanted to ask you a question because I've been thinking about it all day. And I actually asked Sandro, my sweetheart, who's a painter, what makes a portrait a portrait? What is a portrait? And because we all know, I think, that it's possible to set out to make a portrait and to make a bad portrait. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a portrait. It's just a bad portrait. But what is it, do you two think? What is it that makes a portrait?
It's a really good question because it's not just about likeness or, physiognomy or representation. You could have a portrait of someone that's completely mimetic and is, obviously someone's face, but doesn't express anything of their inner life or interiority. So I think portraiture is always about a balance of those two things. It's the exterior, but then a good portrait has something of the inner life of the subject.
That's what I look for.
Yeah.
What about the inner life of the artist, the inner life of the photographer or the painter?
Sometimes you get that too. I think, it's a truism, isn't it, that every portrait is also a portrait of the artist or the photographer. And I think that's true. I think it is always a collaboration, don't you think? It's a negotiation between the sitter and the artist.
Yeah, the artist, they get locked into what is known as a style. Yeah. Photographer, so a portrait is of somebody else, but essentially sometimes of someone's style. About photography. So I like that dance between the two.
I suppose one of the reasons that I ask is because I have been, I have to do all sorts of fancy footwork if ever anybody asks me about my work, because there are certain words I feel uncomfortable using, and that's partly because I'm trying to be authentic and honest about, I find it very difficult to call myself an actor, partly because I never, ever intended to be an actor or an actress for that matter. I feel a bit of a fraud when it comes to that, nomination, because so much of my work was autobiographical. When I was starting out working with Derek Jarman, I worked with Derek Jarman for 7 years, and most of our work was... 9 years rather, on 7 projects. Most of it was silent. And so I never, and autobiographical, because I wasn't necessarily interpreting anything. Even what I call real actors talk about characters. They'll say, I played this character. And so people have picked this up and they say, tell us about your character. I find it I've had sort of inhibition about using the word character. And I always I feel much more comfortable saying, I made a portrait. I made a portrait of this.
Oh, wow. I love that.
And I can't quite figure out why that feels more comfortable in my mouth to say I'm making a portrait of this person rather than I'm creating a character.
Interesting. Well, Tilda, I strongly approve. Actually, I was thinking about this weekend, just looking forward to this conversation. I was thinking, of course, about Orlando, which was one of your pivotal roles, but also, it's so interesting that obviously the Virginia Woolf story spans 500 years from essentially the Tudors to now. It includes portraiture. And I was thinking how interesting it is in terms of our conversation.
It's the most referenced film in history, in fashion.
Yeah,
Every year there's an Orlando-inspired show or shoot.
I think the Met, the Met show is inspired by it this year.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, Virginia Woolf kind of nailed it. She's really not talking about changes at all. She's talking about a fluid, all-embracing, completely consistent spirit. I mean, one of the things I'm clear about with Orlando, having reread it very recently, is it's not actually about gender at all. Yeah. It's not interested in gender at all. If there's one sort of byline that's remembered from the book and mainly from the film, is that it's gender bending, which of course is a kind of slightly arcane term now, because I hope we're getting to the point when we're even beyond tired old gender, binary gender. Yeah. But she's not interested in tired old binary gender at all, Virginia.
And that relates today, going back to the generation of today, who are non-binary, who don't want to be, put in a box, who want to be their authentic selves. And I think Orlando really plays into that,
Well, I always think it's about time, and it's about within time change and continuity and the way those two things interlace. And that's something that we think about a lot, at the Portrait Gallery, which is about how you can use history to do something relevant or even radical.
There's a thing that I've become really clear about, certainly in my own mind, my own perspective about cinema, which is that there's no such thing as an old film. Yeah. And to a certain extent, I feel, would you say true of portraiture? That there's no, I had the opportunity a year or so ago to sort of hang out for quite a long time in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. And I hung out with those late Rembrandts, like face to face for several hours at a time. Truly, it's like walking into a vortex. And it was an encounter with, there's no time there. There's nothing. What would you say about that?
Yeah. No, completely. I think that's what a great portrait does. It's transformative and it cuts across time, and it almost essentially sort of acts as a bridge between the viewer and the sitter. You're looking at someone face to face. A great portrait, whether it's by Rembrandt or, whoever, can achieve that. And the other thing you can do, of course, within a gallery is you can have juxtapositions and dialogues between different epochs, different periods. And that's something we're very keen to do. Not to be anachronistic, and I think it's important to understand the specificity of a particular portrait or a sitter or even a sort of moment in time and what was happening and what might be similar or different, but you can always create a dialogue. And I think the idea that somehow things that are older are therefore, less relevant, not at all. Things are cyclical as well. Edward, I'm sure, in the fashion world, you understand this concept very much, that things come back and go away. And
come back, yeah.
I had this wonderful apprenticeship as an artist with Derek Jarman. I fell very quickly into a world where I felt very at home. And one of the things that used to make us, for a millisecond indignant and then just hysterically, we found it very amusing, was the idea that there was such a thing as a mainstream, and that we just assumed that, there are many, many, many different mainstreams, and, and what was considered a kind of bourgeois mainstream, would be right over there, some sort of muddy little stream. Yeah. And our mainstream was where it was really at. How does that, I've always sensed that you must feel that, and you must be feeling it particularly now in terms of Black Lives Matter, that, people are beginning to realize, because it's all about everything having always been there. It's not about anything new. It's about just acknowledging that everything has always been there. Is that right?
Yeah. Everything has always been, it's really weird when people see you as the other, because to me, I'm me. You know, to me, I'm mainstream, if you want to put it that way.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
The friends I have, you know, we all share similar experiences.
Yeah.
But what's been great about this year is the empathy that has come out in this world. The empathy of putting yourselves in other people's shoes and saying, oh my God, what can I do? The world is not an even playing field. You know, and it's time to just break those boxes and, you know, try and create one big mainstream, whatever that is, that includes everyone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I grew up in ID magazine, and we were very sort of our little clique, and the mainstream was over there. Fast forward 30 years later, I'm working at Vogue, and I haven't changed.
No, the mountain has come to Muhammad.
But the world, I like to think the world has moved on, and the world has progressed to a place that a Black man, gay, from West London, from a working class family, can be the editor of Vogue. And the beauty is, for me, is that people can now look at me and think, oh, if he can do it, I can do it.
Exactly.
I mean, we're different generations, but I feel that we're kind of, you know, bonded by a similar sensibility and a similar cultural moment. And that feeling of the breaking down of a kind of snobbery and gatekeeperishness. I was listening to an old interview and someone said something about selling out. And I went, people have stopped talking about selling out and I'm happy about that, because it's, you know, what does that mean actually? I suppose it means giving yourself away and leaving yourself outside the door when you go in. But I hope that it's true that of all three of us, you know, that we don't go into doors that we can't take ourselves in. And fortunately, we're living at a time when that will go on being the case.
Don't you think selling out is spiritual? It's not economic or about metrics. It's not like how much money you make or how many people you reach. It's about whether you really believe in what you're doing or not. Yeah. That's the difference.
It's about integrity and about authenticity.
Integrity, authenticity, questioning. I think we all question. I do that every day. I question myself every day. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right message? And I don't stop. And I think, Nicholas, you're the same. I mean, your Michael Jackson exhibition. Can we talk about that?
Oh, wow.
Sure.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
One of the most progressive exhibitions. I mean, talk about the unseen. Talk about, you know, questioning and putting out something that can change the world of art. How did you think that was going to be received? How did it all start?
Yeah, tell us.
Well, I mean, like a lot of ideas for exhibitions, I've had the idea for years and years and years. You know, Michael Jackson is someone I grew up with, like many people that I've always been, you know, fascinated by. And years ago, I realized in researching another exhibition, which was about Andy Warhol and his legacy, that also Jackson happened to have been the most depicted cultural figure by, you know, an extraordinary array of artists, from Andy Warhol all the way through to now. And so when I started here at the Portrait Gallery about 5 years ago, I was thinking of ways to just evolve the conversation and to try and shake things up, but in an intelligent way, not just to shock for the sake of it. And this seemed like a really interesting way. It's kind of like the Trojan horse mentality, I guess, where you take a big name that obviously everyone recognizes and everyone can relate to, but you use that to do something interesting. And the effect was there was 50 artists in the show. And I don't know the numbers, but, you know, most of those artists were either African-American or Black British. So it changed the stroke, the demographic of artists we worked with, but equally it completely changed our audience. You know, and we went, suddenly overnight we had like 25%, you know, sort of, I don't like this acronym BAME, but that's still one of the acronyms that's being used.
I hate it.
I think we're getting rid of it now, which is good. So, but, you know, I mean, essentially 25% mostly Black audience, 25% under 25 audience. It completely shifted our demographic, but it was done.
Yes.
It wasn't done. All of those things are happy accidents, but it's got to be done because you know, I personally really was fascinated by this and I believed in it and I wanted to do it. And I didn't particularly care as long as I felt that I'd done a good job with integrity. I didn't really care what people said or thought either. I think that's how you have to do things, right?
I mean, for me, I just think of a kid growing up in London, you know, a kid from diverse background, saying to mum, like I used to do, I have to go to the National Portrait Gallery. That in itself is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we want to be relevant to everyone, and we belong to everyone. It's held in trust for the nation, and that includes everyone. So we really want to. And I know that some people were saying, oh, Michael Jackson. And I said, well, yeah, but if you wait 3 months, then we're doing Gainsborough. So if you don't like this, just wait for 3 months, and there'll be something for you,
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine that we speak to different audiences at different times. We should be. I don't think we should just speak to one type of audience.
Diversity of perspective.
Yeah.
Maybe you should change the name to Gallery of National Portraits.
Thank you. That might be something we do while we're closed.
When you come back.
So just to conclude, if you could talk a little bit about what's next, or maybe how we learn lessons from this year, what you're going to take from this experience to your next project.
I'm in a very privileged position. I'm privileged in that my work is work that I devise and develop myself, and that's not changing. And the work that I am developing at the moment is relatively easily achieved. I'm just rolling on with my colleagues and being incredibly grateful. When I made the film with Pedro Almodovar in July, it was an extremely moving experience for all of us to simply work, just to be on the floor of that studio and work for 10 days only, but to notice how much we love working. And so I'm just rolling on, basically, and being as grateful as I can and counting my blessings.
Good.
I feel the same as Tilda. This year has really taught me a lot about the world we live in and culture, and I just really want to carry on sort of creating a magazine that's inclusive, that speaks to real women, talks about real women's stories, and just really keep questioning what is culture today, what is fashion today, what is beauty today.
Thank you both so much, Edward and Tilda. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
I look forward to seeing you in real life soon.
Yes, please.
I can't wait.
I look forward to part 2.
Yes, in the flesh.
Keep it going.
Definitely.
Thank you for listening to Chanel Connects. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app to get new episodes as soon as they're released.